YouTube, today we're gonna go over the Magnezone and Tapu Bulu team I use for back-to-back battles. Let's get started and roll the episode. So why Magnezone? Magnezone is actually a widely requested Pokemon, I think, from the comment section. I've gotten quite a few requests asking for Magnezone. Of course, with the Magnipole ability, you're able to trap into steel types, which is, of course, an interesting tech. However, I knew that I could trap in steel types, but Magnezone not exactly great at the job, specifically because Zacian with the fighting coverage is really annoying, as well as the possibility of like all the ground partners next to Zacian, or at least ground coverage. You have like stuff like Venusaur, you have Charizard, you have Landorus, which makes Magnezone's job a lot harder. So I definitely need a Pokemon that could be able to help pair up with the Magnezone, so I could still trap in something, and then figure out what Pokemon that Magnezone's trapping in for to make the other Pokemon's job a lot easier. So I had an idea of using Glastrier. I know a lot of you have commented down below about using KDRX Ice Rider, and I have thought about that, but the problem with KDRX Ice Rider is Magnezone plus KDRX Ice Rider is both weak to Urshifu, and I mean really weak to Urshifu. So I didn't like that. I didn't like having the restricted Pokemon, and of course being really weak to Zacian, because I prefer having like a firepower mon that can handle Zacian decently well. And yeah, I thought Glastrier was pretty nice because the fact that even though it's not great against the Urshifu, it can be intimidated, so Wicked Blow, it will do a sizable amount, but it's not like the end of the world, especially with Intimidate, so the close combat won't be doing as much. So I felt like, you know, Glastrier seems like a pretty decent partner, and I've had this idea of using like Leftovers, Calm Mind, Kyogre. I've been using it for quite a bit outside of recording, and it's been super solid, so I felt like, you know what, I could try it on this team. I think like Kyogre is one of the best Pokemon that can probably handle a lot of the Zacian teams, especially like trapping in a Zacian that's like intimidated and then setting up Calm Minds with Kyogre. Seems like a pretty effective strategy, so I want to see how that would work. So how was the team formed? Well, it started off with the Magnezone with the Magnipole strategy, and of course trapping into steel types, and then I was trying to figure out what Pokemon can pair up with Magnezone and do really well with the riddance of the Zacian and other steel types. And I felt like, you know, there were a lot of KDRXs in the comment section, but I didn't like having that restricted Pokemon being weak to the Zacian as well. I felt like it's pretty tough in order to take on Zacian afterward, because then you need like probably 2 or 3 answers, which isn't exactly amazing. So I didn't really like that. You would probably have to go Sun, and then you have to pair up the Sun matchup, and I just didn't really like that. So I was trying to figure out what do I want to exactly pair it up with, and I thought, you know, Glastrier is a Pokemon that's really solid. It has basically the stats of restricted. It's insanely bulky, and Zacian is one of the Pokemon that really hold Glastrier, I think, from doing really well. So I felt like, you know what, I have the Glastrier. I think Glastrier is super solid on this team and could pair it well with the Magnezone and, you know, put in a ton of work. Next Pokemon I decided to add on to the team was going to be Kyogre, because I felt like Calm Mind Kyogre is something I really have experimented with outside of my YouTube channel, and it's been really solid for me in a bunch of other teams that I've tested, and I really did like using this in Series 10, and I think it could do really well in Series 11 as well. I thought, you know what, I'll try out this Calm Mind Kyogre. I think it's a great idea because it's able to take on Zacian with the Intimidates usually, which is really solid. It's a good Pokemon against Zacian for the most part, because like Play Rough with the Intimidate usually isn't doing too much damage, and Calm Mind can really threaten them afterward, which I think is really nice. And it also helps out the Glastrier and the Magnezone because they both have a fire weakness. So, you know, Kyogre with the rain, really solid there. Next Pokemon I decided to add was going to be the Incineroar, and I felt like Incineroar just really paired well with this because I knew I needed some form of Intimidate. And I didn't feel like I was really going to use Landorus too much. I feel like if I was Dynamaxing Pokemon, it's probably going to be either Kyogre or Glastrier, so I didn't want another Max Pokemon. I felt like, you know, Incineroar is really nice. Of course, it helps with the fire coverage, the dark coverage. I think it's a really solid Pokemon. It's on this team really well. And the next Pokemon I decided to add was going to be the Trick'em Setter, and I knew I wanted a Trick'em Setter that wasn't weak to fighting. I thought about Porygon, but the fact that I would have 4 weak to fighting was just not great for me at all, I felt like. So I wanted something that could also help out against Urshifu, because I felt like Urshifu was a little bit annoying. So I decided, you know what, I'll go Mimikyu, because Mimikyu is pretty solid in that regard. Play rough for the Urshifu is pretty nice. Usually can get Trick 'em up for the most part. Wisp was really nice, and I know it was paired up with Kyogre Leftovers previously, because you could Wisp, for instance, a Rillaboom, so Grassy Glide isn't doing as much damage to Kyogre. And I felt like, you know, that could be a really cool combination. So it's a Pokemon that can pretty much consistently get Trick 'em up, and Taunt is pretty solid as well for like a Moongus if I do face it. So I felt like Mimikyu was going to be pretty solid on this team, so I added Mimikyu. And the last Pokemon, I knew I needed a grass Pokemon or something to help out against Bulky Waters, because even though I can kind of stall it out with Kyogre, I felt like Magnezone takes way too much from like opposing Kyogre, so it's a really big threat. And I thought about adding Rillaboom to the team. I really did. But the problem I had with Rillaboom is that, yeah, Grassy Glide Fake Out, of course, could be a thing. But the problem I had with it was it didn't exactly like help out as much as I think I would have wanted. Like the Fake Out pressure, of course, and the U-turn pressure would be really nice, I felt. But I also wanted like something that could also help out against, you know, Urshifu. And yeah, I could help out against the water Urshifu. And I guess Fake Out can kind of help out overall. But I felt like against stuff like Calyrex, the Urshifus, and the Regielekis, Rillaboom not exactly the best Pokemon because it could take a lot from like a close combat or a Wicked Blow, which I really didn't want to deal with. So I thought about it, and then I'm like, I can go Tapu Bulu. The Tapu Bulu Fairy typing is really clutch here because that allows me to take on both forms of Urshifu really nice. I'm going to lose Fake Out, which I think is fine because I don't think I need to rely on Fake Out as much, I feel like. And I really did like the Horn Leech. Like the Horn Leech recovery I felt like was super good against the offense. And the more I thought about it, it was really good against those offensive cores of Urshifu, Eleki, and the Calyrex Shadow Riders. So I felt like, you know what? Tapu Bulu makes a lot of sense here. I'm going to run it. It gives me a fighting resist, which I think is really good. And I mean really good for this team. It allows me a good switch into Tapu Bulu, especially if I am going with like Incineroar, Kyogre, and Magnezone trapping. I can bring in Tapu Bulu and have a fighting resist, which I think is phenomenal. So I felt like overall adding Tapu Bulu to the team, it was solid. And that is how the 6 was formed. All right, let's go over the items, the movesets, and the EV spreads of the team. We have Chople Berry Magnezone up first with the Magnapole ability with the Thunderbolt, Flash Cannon, Volt Switch, and Protect. Now, I wanted either Shuka or Chople on the Magnezone since I wanted to take hits, and I had leftovers already on the Kyogre at this point, so I was like, what do I really want in Magnezone? I felt like a type resist berry was pretty nice. Now, the thing with Shuka is that Magnezone's usually taking max Quakes, I felt like, in Fury, especially with like Landorus and Venusaur, so I felt like, you know, is there really a point of having a Shuka Berry, especially like if it's a Venusaur matchup? Then yeah, they're just going to go for a max Quake, or at the other case, they're going to have Vine Lash damage usually on Magnezone, and then Earth Power, and they would probably still KO through the Shuka. So I felt like Chople Berry made sense since I'm trapping into Zacian. I want to like wall it a bit better, right? So Sacred Sword and the close combats I want to take better with the Intimidate as well. So I felt like it was a pretty good roll. It also helped out against Urshifu, I think, for the most part. So that's why I decided to go with the Chople Berry on Magnezone. Magnapole, of course, you want to trap in the steel types, especially that Zacian, and the moveset Thunderbolt, Flash Cannon, Volt Switch, Protect. Thunderbolt, Flash Cannon, of course, are the staple attacks, and then Volt Switch. So there are a lot of support moves you could really run on Magnezone. Magnezone's got decent options like Magnet Rise. You got like some screens and a few other things, but I felt like it's not really that worth it. I felt like I thought about Sub as well at one point, and I was like, I felt like Sub just didn't help me. It would just make Magnezone trapped in, and I would probably like be less inclined to switch it out. Which, yeah, if I'm trapping in Zacian, yeah, that could be an argument. But I felt like for the most part, there were some awkward situations where that would happen and it wouldn't be that great for me. So I felt like, you know what, I'll have Volt Switch since I am pivoting probably between the grass type in Tapu Bulu and Incineroar for the Intimidates. I felt like, you know what, if I'm pivoting so much, might as well have Volt Switch. It gives me that option as well. It hits some bulky waters as well for some nice chip damage. And yeah, that's why I decided to have the Magnezone with the Volt Switch here. And Protect, of course, to preserve the Magnezone, you want to like trap in the steel types, and of course you want to stall it out as much as possible. And the EV spread here, we have the max HP on the Magnezone. This is to get the maximum recovery from the grassy terrain from the Tapu Bulu. And then I felt like I want special attack because I also want to hit the Zacians for a lot, since I want to try to get rid of the Zacians as quick as possible. And with the Intimidate, I should be decently physically bulky. I went with like 156 special attack because that gave me an extra stat point with the Modest Nature. And then I put the rest into more of a physical defense. Take the Zacian like Sacred Sword close combat and the Urshifu attacks a bit better. And then I just dumped the remaining into special defense and speed. One weird thing about the Magnezone is I felt like I wanted Shuka Berry too. It's just a really weird item choice. Chople Berry did activate a few times and did work as planned, but there were some games where it's like, you know what? They did actually just go for like an Earth Power at one point. It's like, the Shuka Berry would have been pretty nice there, but it's a really weird item choice. I feel like for the most part, it's going to be situational regardless. So it just really depends on what team you're facing. So next up, we got the Leftovers Kyogre with the Drizzle ability with Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, Calm Mind, and Protect. I really like Calm Mind Kyogre, especially compared to like Series 10. I liked Calm Mind Kyogre a lot in that series too, but the fact that Rillaboom is a lot less common in this series compared to last series, it is pretty solid. So I like having this Calm Mind Kyogre. +1 Origin Pulse in the rain is a really big threat. It does a lot of damage, can really threaten the Zacian, and gives me a lot of room to run the physical bulk on the Kyogre, which allows me to take on the Zacians a bit better, which is great for Magnezone trapping. So I felt like this was a pretty good set to run paired with it. I have the Leftovers, of course, because of the healing. With the Calm Mind, it would be able to take on a lot of attacks, especially with the Grassy Terrain Leftovers combination, healing 1/8 of the health every time and 1/4 of the health after Protect, which is pretty solid. Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, of course, as the coverage here. Now, I thought about having Thunder, but I felt like since I have the Magnezone for electric coverage and the grass type coverage in Tapu Bulu, I probably didn't need Thunder. I would have liked Thunder in a few times, but I felt like Ice Beam was just pretty good for the most part, especially trying to catch the Rillaboons on the switch. Hitting Eternatus is pretty nice, I think, for the most part. And yeah, just having the Ice Beam coverage for like Dragapult and a few other things is just nice. So having Ice Beam was okay. Calm Mind, of course, very signature move here. And the Protect, of course, to preserve the Kyogre. The spread here, I wanted a bulky Kyogre that could still do damage outside of Calm Mind, and I wanted as much HP as possible. This thing is supposed to be bulky, so max HP to max out the bulk, then 124 defense because I still wanted some decent special attack. So I'm going to have a modest 76 special attack because that gives me a +1 stat point. I'm not investing too much, especially with the Calm Mind. I'll still do decent damage without one, so I really like that. And then I went with 124 into the physical defense since I felt like that is going to be pretty nice pairing with the Intimidate. It takes some pretty good calcs, like for instance the Zacian at neutral. Play Rough is a 3 KO on the Kyogre, which is really nice, and with some Leftovers and Grassy Terrain recovery could be a 4 KO, which is really solid. The remaining, I decided, you know what, I still want some special defense to help out against Aleki if I don't have to Calm Mind boost, and I'll throw in a little bit extra into speed. And yeah, like even though I don't have speed control, like I have Leftovers EVs, so I'll put it in there. Overall, I love Calm Mind Kyogre. I think it's a really solid Pokemon in the format. Of course, you got to have good the Lapras answers, because if you fight a Lapras, it's a little bit hard to set up. But I felt like I could handle the Lapras all right with the combination of Magnezone, Glastrier, and Tapu Bulu. Next Pokemon we have is the Assault Vest Tapu Bulu with the Grassy Surge ability with Horn Leech, Brick Break, Darkest Lariat, and Nature's Madness. Out of every Pokemon that I used on the team, the one that impressed me and I thought was the underdog was this Tapu Bulu set. I actually didn't think the Tapu Bulu would be that amazing, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to regret not having the Rillaboom. But overall, Tapu Bulu was a very solid Pokemon on this team. The typing was actually pretty good, especially against the hyper offensive teams. And yeah, I like the Assault Vest for the bulk. I think a bulky grass type to help take on the water type moves, especially from opposing Kyogres, is really important, I felt like, for this team. It was really nice. It took the attacks pretty well. It has pretty good bulk, so I really did like this Tapu Bulu set with the Assault Vest, the Grassy Search for the ability. Horn Leech was really nice as well. The recovery with the Assault Vest is so good, especially since you have the Grassy Terrain boosting up the Horn Leech and giving you HP. Really solid. I like the Brick Break here as well, being able to break screens, which is really nice. Even though Bulu does get access to close combat this generation, I thought about it. I felt like, you know what, being able to break through like Grimmsnarl screens next to Zacian would be fantastic. So I really like the Brick Break tech. Darkest Lariat for the Shadow Rider Calyxes, and the Assault Vest allows me to take them on. And then Nature's Madness I felt like was really good chip. Like even if they intimidate Bulu with like Insane, I'd be able to get some Nature's Madness off and chip away the opponent's team and weaken them for the Kyogre or the Glastrier or Magnezone combination, which I felt like was really nice. The EV spread here, I knew I wanted max HP, of course, to maximize the Grassy Terrain recovery. I had the 76 attack adamant, and I felt like this was an okay benchmark because there's a +1 stat point. I wanted a lot of special defense for the Assault Vest, since I would be switching into water type attacks, and I felt like it was pretty nice to have here. And the Grassy Terrain already boosting up my Horn Leech damage, which I felt like was already pretty solid. So I felt like, you know what, I'm gonna invest a lot into special defense. I'm gonna go like as much as I possibly can. I felt like without like feeling that I'm not doing as much damage, I felt like this was a good benchmark. Then I put a little bit extra into defense, you know, to take a little bit better Behemoth Blade with the Intimidates and the Wisp, and then the remaining to speed. Overall, Tapu Bulu was a very solid Pokemon, and I was very surprised how well it did. Of course, Grassy Glide would be really nice, as well as Play Rough. That would be fantastic. But overall, wasn't as bad as I thought. And you know what? The Tapu Bulu actually did do a lot of work on the team. I was very surprised and very pleased with how Tapu Bulu was able to put in the work. Next Pokemon we have is the Life Orb Glastrier with the Icicle Crash, High Horsepower, Close Combat Protect with the Chilling Neigh ability. This Pokemon, I've talked about this before. Absolutely insane ice type, really good coverage, and I felt like, you know what, this Pokemon got the stats of a restricted Pokemon without being a restricted Pokemon. So basically, I could have the Kyogre, which is a good restricted, and then this Glastrier, which can take advantage of Magnezone, doing the Magnet Trap, full stuff, which I felt like was pretty good. Of course, Zacian is one of the biggest threats to Glastrier. And I felt like, you know what, if I can eliminate the Zacian early, I could set up for the Glastrier. So Life Orb, of course, so I can dish out as much damage as I possibly can. And since I had the Assault Vest on Bulu, really good offensive capabilities. And Icicle Crash, high horsepower, close combat protect, pretty standard on the Glastrier. The EV spread, not much to say about it. It's a pretty simple Glastrier / Calix spread I pretty much always run. Max HP, 196 attack, because it gives a pretty high attack stat with the stat point boost with the plus attack nature, and then 60 special defense because it is the lowest stat that Glastrier has. And this Pokemon, absolutely insane, super bulky, does a lot of damage. Its biggest nemesis is going to be the steel types in Zamazenta and Zacian because of their big powerful steel type moves, but overall Glastrier is an absolute monster under the right conditions and can really put the hurt on some teams. So it can really dish out a lot of damage, and of course it was built around the concept of Magnezone being able to trap in the steel types, so Glastrier could be able to put in a lot of work. Didn't really get to accomplish that much actually, as I felt like Glastrier was left behind, and I was actually more impressed with the Magnezone, Kyogre, Tapu Bulu, and Incineroar matchup. But yeah, overall, very solid Pokemon. It's always a threat you have to respect in team preview, and always got to have a game plan for it. So yeah, it was still really nice to have as that threat. Next Pokemon we have is the Mental Herb Mimikyu with Disguise ability with Play Rough, Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, Trick Room. I thought about, like, you know, I'm going to have a Trick Room user. What am I going to really have as a Trick Room user? I thought about Porygon, but the fact that I would have like 4 Pokemon weak to fighting was just like no bueno for me. So I felt like, you know what, I probably can go with the Mimikyu. I feel like Mimikyu is a pretty good pairing because there were a lot of teams that ran Mimikyu Kyogre with the Incineroar or sometimes a Rillaboom and Zapdos back in Series 10. I thought, you know, maybe I could make this work. Of course, it really does help out with Urshifu, which I felt like was pretty nice. Of course, with the extra steel weakness, it's not exactly the most ideal Pokemon, but I felt like, you know what, I think it's okay to have that extra steel weakness since I do have Incineroar and Kyogre that are pretty okay at resisting those. I have Magnezone as a resist as well, and I felt like it would be okay for the most part, and it could threaten Shadow Rider Calyxes because I could bluff like Shadow Sneak, which I felt like was pretty nice. So I felt like, yeah, that's why I'm going to add Mimikyu. I felt like it's a pretty consistent Trick Room user as well. So I had Mimikyu with the Mental Herb, of course, with the Disguise ability with Player of Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, and Trick Room. So Mental Herb, of course, Disguise usually allows it with Fake Out to usually survive most attacks unless it's like against a Ghost type and a Dynamax right off the bat, but that means they do have to go for their Dynamax immediately just to prevent Trick Room from going up, which is pretty nice. And Mental Herb does prevent the taunts, which is really good. And then Disguise, of course, fantastic ability, makes it basically have a free hit or like 12%, I believe, of its HP, which is pretty solid. Player of Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, and Trick Room. The Play Rough, I wanted it for Urshifu. Wisp, I wanted to wisp the physical attackers like Rillaboom, for instance, which is really nice, as well as Zacian. Taunt, of course, for like a Moongus stuff, and Trick Room to set up the Trick Room for Glastrier. EV spread, I wanted a physically defensive Mimikyu that could take on like Urshifu, like Wicked Blows. I felt like was pretty good. I went with max HP. I gave 156 defense with a plus defense nature. I still wanted to have some special defense, so I just gave it 100 special defense. Overall, I felt like Mimikyu was actually pretty weak. I think I only brought it like a few times. I never really tried to go for Trick Room. I brought Glastrier more times than I brought Mimikyu, and I felt like I never really set up Trick Room. And I also noticed that this team, while playing, had a really big weakness to just like Bulldoze plus like Metagross and Solgaleo, which I completely forgot about. Like, even though I was trying to trap steel types, I'm just so used to Zacian, you don't really see much Metagross, Solgaleo. I kind of like overlooked those. And then it kind of is pretty much an auto loss because Bulldoze into like the +2 just is a really big threat. So I feel like if I were to rebuild this team, I'd probably replace Mimikyu out of any other Pokemon, and I'd probably give it something that can, if it can get Trick Room up pretty safely against those strategies. P2 could probably do that, but I'm still not sure about having the 4 fighting weaknesses. I'm not really comfortable with that. I'd probably have something that could take on, for instance, those specifically the Solgaleo plus the, you know, Bulldoze strats or the Metagross. I feel like it's pretty important. So I feel like, you know, something like a Foul Playmon that can usually be immune to like the Bulldoze combination, like a Moltres or maybe like Urshifu Choice Bandit could be like decent. But of course that does fall victim to Spectrier, Bulldoze specifically. So it's pretty rough to say, but I think there are definitely some mods that could really help. Maybe Gengar could help out as well. There's like a few definitely Pokemon that can definitely work on this team, but I do think that is really important. Or maybe like Galarian Moltres I think could work on this team with the Foul Play, since it does ignore the Bulldoze and the Foul Play. Like if it outspeeds, could be really solid. Just really depends, but I do think that is a pretty big threat to aware of, as I didn't really account for team building process. So yeah, that is something I would definitely consider if I were to rebuild this team. Last mon, Incineroar. Do I really have to discuss Incineroar? I went for Citrus Berry set with the Intimidate, Flare Blitz, Dark Glastrier, Parting Shot, Fake Out. Really good with the Fire, Water, Grass core that I had with Tapu Bulu plus Kyogre. Intimidate's really super solid, of course. The fact that it helps against the Shadow Rider Calyrex is really nice. And overall, Intimidate fire coverage, great against Zacian pivots. It's just really solid, of course. Citrus Berry for the recovery and allowing me to have Parting Shot. I like the Flare Blitz, Darkest Slayer, Parting Shot, Fake Out is a pretty standard Incineroar coverage moveset. And I went with the same especially defensive Incineroar set because I just really like the set. It just ends up doing the work, I feel like, for the most part. Sure, I could go more physically defensive, but it did have some usage. The special defense came in handy against the Dialgas I played, and I actually fought quite a few of them. And yeah, the Dialga is actually a pretty scary matchup. So I really did like having the especially defensive Incineroar set, as it really did help out against the Dialga. Of course, the EV spread is to survive the Xerneas +2 Moonblast. Of course, that's really rare, but overall, I do like having a near max special defense Incineroar, something I'm really comfortable with, and it really did pay off, I think, on the team because I was able to survive a lot of the Dialga max move combinations. So how to use the team and what are the most common leads with the team? I'd say there's probably 3 different ways to use the team for the most part. Mainly, you would go with like the Trick Room mode with Mimikyu, Glastrier, and just like try to set up Trick Room and have Glastrier just go straight out for the damage output. If there's something that's stopping the Glastrier in a steel type like Zacian, you could go with like a slower route in order to take on the Zacian, usually with like Magnezone, Incineroar, and pivoting and a bunch of other things. And then the other mode is probably like straightforward, just trying to set up with the Calm Mind Kyogre to really sweep a team. And this is usually done by usually having Kyogre, the Tapu Bulu, and the Incineroar as a combination. And I think all 3 of these modes are definitely solid in their own position. So overall, what are the common leads with the team? I say the most common leads, of course, Incineroar is just really good as a lead. I think Incineroar, Intimidate with Parting Shot and Fake Out support, absolutely insane. Pairs really well with Kyogre and Mimikyu, of course, to set up with Calm Mind and Trick Room. But of course, can really pair up with anything else. Realistically, it's just a really solid Pokemon in order to do that. The next common lead I would say would be like a Magnezone lead. Magnezone can lead, and of course, try to trap into Steel type immediately. I usually try to in the back because I like Parting Shot out into Magnezone. It's usually safer for the most part. But it's definitely something that can happen, and Volt Switch is pretty nice, especially like Magnezone Instant, switch out to Instant turn 1. Volt Switch is pretty nice as a strategy. I also really like Kyogre lead in general because Kyogre sets up the rain to help out the Magnezone, the Glastrier, or the Tapu Bulu. It's really nice, and I think for the most part it's pretty solid. And then afterward, I'd say Glastrier is actually a pretty decent lead. It depends. I actually led Glastrier a lot outside of Trick Room, and I just lead it, especially against like Sun teams. It's not the most solid matchup because you do have to play with like against the Sleep Powder Venusaur, which is a little bit annoying ally switch that definitely was frustrating for me to play against. And I would usually try to lead Incineroar and Glastrier and try to catch like the Torkoal in and try to slow down the Venusaur. So getting rid of Venusaur for the Kyogre was pretty good, I think, for the most part. Of course, the day of Charizard, it definitely would make it a bit difficult, but you could usually try to play around that, I think, using the Mimikyu mode instead. And I would say those are probably the most common leads that I used with the team. Otherwise, it would probably be very situational. And that is the show. I hope you all enjoyed the thought process that went behind the Magnezone Tapu Bulu team. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like down below, leave a comment down below. It really does help me out. And make sure you try out the rental code on your screen, available for 2 weeks, and the paste bin available in the description. You can also check out the videos that this team, of course, was featured in if you haven't for some reason. And you can go check out some other awesome teams, such as my Slowking team with Mudsdale, which has been a very big threat. But otherwise, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, people. And until we bow again, I'll catch y'all later.